I have successfully closed everything, so I won't have any notifications popping up and doxing me or doing anything else crazy. So I think that at this point, I am ready to get started. Hello, everyone. Hello. I am Will, and I am thrilled to begin this, what I'm calling the first episode of Built from Scratch. So what we are going to do over the course of who knows how long is we are going to start with a blank Scratch project with nothing in it at all. Well, it's going to have the cat in it, but only very briefly. We're going to start with that blank Scratch project, and then we are going to build a game. We're going to build something piece by piece live. We're going to do it an hour a day, at least at first. It's going to be from 12 to 1 on weekdays. Just figure out the schedule. There's a lot of moving parts in life and, the world. And I don't quite know what is going to be most useful and what scheduling is going to work out for everyone. So play it by ear for a little bit, but at least this week, all this week, 12 to 1, I'm going to be working on this project here on Twitch, and I would love for you to join me. A few things to say before we begin. I'm going to click create and let this just kind of start loading, but a few things I want to say about the project before we begin are that, one, if you are watching, that's super exciting. We are going to, at the beginning of every project, we're going to open up some code. At the end of every project, we'll save it. And ideally, we will kind of keep a running, updated version of all the different projects, all the different work that we do, so that if you want to follow along or look at a previous stream's code, you should be able to do that. I'm going to do my best to make that work. So that's thing one. We're going to start. Sorry, there's a lot going on in the background. I don't know if you can hear. There's a dog. Shiloh is barking. There's a lot of craziness, but that's okay. So that's thing one. Thing two, every day we're gonna start wherever it is that we left off in the previous stream, and we're just gonna keep on working on our project and making something. And I want to talk a little bit about, before I jump in, I want to talk a little bit about the reasoning for this project, for this endeavor, and it's that there are lots and lots of resources on the web, in the world, kind of showing people how to do a specific thing in Scratch and in other programming languages. But it can be really hard sometimes to find good resources about how to take a lot of these small pieces and put them together into a larger project. And so that's what I want to do here, is just go through the whole process of making something, starting from nothing and building it piece by piece, doing it all live, talking about my thought process, talking about what I'm doing, going through, so that you can see how it all comes together. Because one of the big one of the hardest things about software, about programming, is taking all these little pieces of your project, pieces of your game, or whatever it is you're making, and putting them together into a coherent whole. So that's the goal, that's the plan, that's what we're going to be doing on an hour a day for as long as we do it. So anyway, all of that said, the videos should be, if you're watching now, you are watching at twitch.com/builtfromscratch. You can also find the videos on YouTube, or check out the Scratch. You check out my Scratch profile, Built from Scratch, and I will have links to all of the things there as well. Last week we did some previous work making a simple platformer, just as a series of test streams, so you can see if I'm going to jump in here and just kind of show you. We made this simple platformer here where you can run and jump, and oh my gosh, I forgot that I made an enemy. And then there you win. Great. So if you're interested in making that, or seeing how that is made, you can look at the videos from that, but we are going to start a whole new project now. So I'm going to click on the new project button and get started. What do I want to do with this new project? Well, I want to make a game that is set in space where you control a starship and you can fly around. You can fly around a whole galaxy filled with stars and planets, and you can visit planets and you can talk to aliens, and there's a whole bunch of little pieces there that I want to work on. So that's I'm kind of going to be kind of inspired by two main classic games from I don't know, the 80s and 90s. If you are familiar with them, the kind of two big touchstones for this project will be Sid Meier's Pirates, which is a great game where you control a pirate ship and you go sailing around and I don't know, visit towns and steal things, and it's a great game. And then the other game that I am going to be like really leaning heavily on is a game called Star Control 2. Where, again, you can take a starship and fly it around from place to place. This is a game that has a grand plot where you have to save, all life in the universe, basically. We'll see what our narrative and plotting looks like for our game. But those are two design touchstones that I'm going to be kind of building off of. Just throwing that out there because it might be interesting. But all of that is getting super way ahead of ourselves, because right now what we are looking at is a blank Scratch project and an empty Scratch Cat sprite. We do not have starships, we do not have galaxies, we do not have aliens, we do not have anything at all. And before we add those sorts of things, we are going to have to start from the beginning. Before we have a big grand game with all of these ambitious features, we're going to start from the beginning and have to start coding something. And the way this project is going to come together is it's going to be piece by piece. First we're going to make a starship, then we're going to make some planets, then we're going to be able to travel between them, and it's all a little bit at a time. Because that's how stuff gets done, is a little bit at a time. So I want to talk a little bit about the plan for what's coming up, of the plan for this project, just to make a few notes so that we know where we're going. We don't have to have a full design document or a full scale everything, but we want to have a little bit of understanding about what we're doing. Ooh, and I see that I'm a little bit shimmery, because I'm gesticulating and my camera's doing some auto adjustment. So let me just do some work on that here. I'm gonna jump in here. I'm just a little too shimmery, aren't I? Maybe I'll just up this a little bit and see what happens. Okay, well, we'll see how that goes. Figuring out my streaming settings is always going to be a bit of an ongoing process. So, but yeah, it looks better. Looks better now. So less shimmery in the background, and I still look mostly fine. My sweater is a little bit sparkly, but that's okay. Great. So, as I said, we were going to do a little bit of just thinking about what it is we're going to make before we start making it. So I'm just going to make a little bit of a document here. And in the things that we are going to want to make a game where the player flies a starship, visits star systems and planets, talks to aliens. And that's all I want to think about right now. There's going to be more things. We're probably going to collect resources, and And yeah, upgrade your ship, upgrade ships. And all of these things will be like different kind of parts of the game and different modes of the game. So, but initially, what we want to do is have a starship, fly a starship around the screen. That's going to be our first big goal. Then we're going to make a scrolling universe, a scrolling galaxy of stars to fly around. And then make a system where we can visit stars and go into and enter solar system navigation mode. Right, so first we're going to make a starship that we can fly in. Then we're going to make some stars that we can fly to. Then we're going to make planets in the stars, in the star systems that we can visit. That's actually going to be a bunch of work for the next little while. It's going to be a pretty big goal. So we'll see what we get, how quickly everything goes. But it's always good whenever you're making something. It's always good to kind of have a plan. Be like, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm doing. This is where I'm going. It doesn't have to be a fully fleshed out plan, but it's good to have some idea. So here I am back at my empty Scratch project. I don't want this Scratch cat. We are not going to be flying a cat around space. We are going to be flying a starship. So I'm going to real quick make some kind of basic starship art. A really simple starship. And we will, over the course of the project, hopefully kind of replace our placeholder programmer art with kind of more interesting, better art. But for the moment, we're just going to make ourselves a little triangle type starship. So I'm going to zoom in here. Try to keep that in the center. And just try to make myself a nice little triangle. So I'm using the line tool here, and I'm just trying to line up my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think this is oops. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think this is symmetrical now. Maybe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, but this is not quite up all the way. Oh, geez. That's not what I wanted. I wanted to grab I'm going to use this tool, which is the node wiggler tool. Now we get that little jaggy there. All right, let's delete this. Let's try one more time. And let's maybe not go quite so far down. And maybe let's just throw that there and see what it looks like. That looks okay. That looks just fine. Nothing too, doesn't look perfect, but that's okay. So I'm going to call this my starship. Actually, I'm going to call it player ship because it is going to be the player starship. There will probably be other starships as well. Ooh, wow. What just happened? What just happened? Something, I don't know. I don't know about this starship. All right, that looks a little better. So this is going to be the player starship, and I'm going to take this, I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to add one more little piece to this little starship here, and it's just going to be a little bit of a thruster animation. So when we are applying thrust, we will be able to see So this is nothing fancy, but we're going to call this thrusters off, and we're going to call this thrusters on. Okay, thrusters on. And so we now have this player ship. It has 2 costumes, and we want to be able to use it to fly around the screen. Doesn't have any code yet, so we can't yet do anything. So how do I want to control this starship? Well, I want to control it. It's kind of using what I kind of call asteroids controls. The control scheme from this very very old classic top-down starship flying game where you have to shoot little polygonal asteroids with your starship and try to avoid running into things. So what are the controls for this starship going to be like? Well, we want to press up to apply thrust and press left, right, arrow keys to turn. Applying thrust should apply a force that moves our starship in a given direction. And of course, we're going to be in space. So one of the really important things about this is that the starship should, drift in space, follow some kind of basic physics of drifting and flying and having momentum. So I'm going to say basic physics. So that's going to be how it's going to work, right? So press up to apply thrust, press left, right to turn, and we're going to have some physics that describes our actual movement process. So that's not too complicated. So let's just kind of jump in and do it. So when green flag clicked, this is always our start button in a Scratch project. And we're going to when we press the flag, we're just going to have the starship start moving around. We're going to have the game start. Eventually, we'll probably, have more complicated stuff. We might have a start menu. We might have a way to save or load progress, things like that. So we won't immediately start all of our gameplay when the green flag is clicked. But for now, that is not the way it's going to be. So for now, we are going to just press the green flag and we'll find ourselves immediately playing our game. So when green flag clicked, what do we want? We want to check for some arrow key presses and move the starship around based on those arrow key presses. So in control here, we have this if blank then blank block. And we have this forever loop. And this is a really common kind of pattern in Scratch. Is you're going to have a lot of things where you're going to put them in a forever loop and be checking things over and over again in order to see to update the state of your game based on some kind of user input. So in this case, we're going to say, if the up arrow key is pressed, we're going to do something, and if the left and right arrow keys are pressed, we're going to do some other things. So, and we're going to do that with the if-then blocks. But actually, one of these I'm going to make be an if-else here. So, what do I have? All right, if blank, then blank, else blank. Okay, this is going to be for if my up arrow key is pressed, because I want to say if not touching mouse pointer, arrow key pressed right here. If key space pressed, nope. That's the block I want. I'm going to use this little drop down triangle-y thing and pick up arrow key. So if key up arrow pressed, I want to do some movement. So I'm just going to do something really simple first. I'm going to say move 10 steps. But then I'm also going to add something else. I'm going to go into looks. And I'm going to say switch costume to thrusters on. And then down here I'm going to say switch costume to thrusters off. So now, if I press the green flag, you can see that the thrusters are no longer on the starship. If I press the up arrow key, my starship moves to the right because that's the direction it is facing. It moves 10 steps to the right. And the thruster costume gets turned on. So we get that kind of animation there. So that's great. But if I press the left arrow key or the right arrow key, nothing happens, right? I do not turn yet because I haven't written any code to make that happen. So, how do I do that? Same basic idea. If key up arrow pressed, well, for this, I want to say if key left arrow pressed. And of course, for this one, I'll say if key right arrow pressed. Nothing fancy here. If key left arrow pressed, what do I want to do? I want to turn to the left 15 degrees. If the right arrow key is pressed, I want to turn to the right 15 degrees. I'm going to press the flag, and you can see that that is happening. But actually, one thing that I'm noting about this is that I don't actually want to turn around the tip of the starship. I want to turn probably around the center of the starship. So I'm going to go into my costumes here. And this is going to be a little tricky, but I think we can probably do it. Yeah, so Scratch has now automatically added this feature where I can grab this, and I can move that center, and I can line up the costume. Ooh, but that's not going to be right, is it? That's going to be wrong and a little bit tricky. So I'm noticing a little bit of a problem, which is that, okay. All right. So, sorry, I just did something without explaining it. I need to get better at not doing that. What I noticed was that when I had this with the thruster costume, if I had the whole thing selected, the center cross point was a little bit further back than if I have the whole thing selected here, because it was counting this little thruster animation as part of the costume, because it is part of the costume. And so it was moving the center, the middle point, to the left. I want these two centers to be in the same position with respect to this little triangle-y shape here, and to not care about the thruster. So I had to adjust it so that I just select just the ship body and not the thruster, so I could get the center of this part. So that seems to work. And now when I turn, oops. All right, this is a problem. This is something that I find myself doing all the time. I forget that I have this selected, and I press arrow keys to run my project, to run my game, and it starts moving these things around. So you can actually adjust the position of things in the Scratch Paint Editor using the arrow keys, which is great, except not great because it's not great if you are not planning on doing that and you're just trying to play your game. Okay, so I'm going to hop back over to the code, make sure I'm not doing anything. Great, so now I can fly this starship, press the up arrow key to turn this thruster on, and I move forward, press the left and right arrow keys to spin this ship around. And that's great. You can see I have sort of done this. Right? I have sort of done what I said I was trying to do, but I haven't entirely, right? Because the big goal here is to, well, the big thing I haven't done is I haven't done this basic physics step. So when I say I press up to apply thrust, I haven't really done that. At the moment, I've made it so that you can press up to move the ship forward. Moving the ship forward is a little bit different from, the idea of applying the thruster, right? Moving the ship forward is going to change the position of the ship. But if we want to have some kind of physics in this game, we don't just want to change the position. We want to change the speed of the ship. We want to accelerate and decelerate and have the ship move in some way. Because if I start the ship going in one direction, if I start the ship moving if I turn the thruster on, I should then continue to drift, even if I don't have the thruster on anymore, right? I should have some momentum, some inertia that causes the ship to continue moving in whatever direction it was previously moving, whether or not the thruster is applied. Okay, so that's relatively easily stated. It's a little bit more complicated to program, If I, at the moment, as I said, when I press the thruster, the ship moves in a direction and it changes its position. The way we think about position in Scratch is using this X and Y coordinate number here. All right, so we say, if I move to the right, you can see that number gets bigger. If I move to the left, you can see it gets smaller. And if I go up, you can see the Y gets bigger. And if I go down, unsurprisingly, you see the Y gets smaller. The middle of the screen is 0, 0. Right? 0, 0. And so things that are below the middle are negative. Things that are above the middle are positive. Same thing with the left and the right. So when I say I am changing the position of the starship, what I am doing kind of under the hood in a certain regard is that I am changing the value of the X, this X number, and I'm changing the value of this Y number. And so when I press the up arrow key, I am immediately changing my position. But I don't want to immediately change my position. I actually want to change my speed. I want to change the direction. I want to change my speed and then allow my speed to change my position. Right? If I apply a thrust, it should apply a force in a given direction, and that should change how fast I am going, rather than changing directly where I am. To do that, we have this built-in X and Y position, but we don't have a built-in X and Y speed variable, so I'm going to have to make those. I'm going to go down here to this orange circle where it says variables. I'm going to click make a variable, and I'm going to choose for this sprite only. In general, we almost always want to make variables for this sprite only, just to make our program more readable and more understandable. In this case, we absolutely want to choose for this sprite only because we're going to make this variable called speed X. And we're going to make another variable called speed Y. And it's really important that these two variables are made for this sprite only because other things in the universe of our game will very likely also have a speed X and a speed Y. So now I have a speed X and a speed Y, and we are going to think for just one moment about the definition of speed and what physics is. So what does speed mean? Speed means how fast something is going. And what that means is how the rate of change of our position, right? So if I talk about speed in the real world, I might talk about miles per hour or meters per second, but I'm saying I am going to, my position is going to change by a certain amount in a certain amount of time. Now, in this game, we aren't going to think about real world units like meters, and we're not going to think about real world time units either, like seconds. We're going to think about, pixels or at first. And we're going to think about some kind of abstract unit of time. We're going to call it like ticks or something like that. But the basic idea is the same. We're going to change our position. We're going to change these two numbers by certain amounts every certain amount of time. So that's what speed means. So why don't we do it? Why don't we just make that happen? In this forever loop, we're going to say every time we go through this loop, let's go ahead and change our X and change our Y. We're going to change our X by our speed X. We're going to change our Y by our speed Y. That's perfect. That's physics right there. We're saying we have a speed, and we're going to change our position based on that speed. And that's just the definition of speed. At the moment, of course, speed X and speed Y are 0. And we're still doing all of this other stuff, so our program is not doing anything different, but it should do something different soon. So, instead of moving when we press the thruster, we want to somehow change our speed X and our speed Y. And to do that, we need to do a little bit of math. Well, we don't need to do a little bit of math. We need to ask Scratch to do a little bit of math for us. So you could imagine if we were facing completely to the right, exactly 90 degrees to the right, like we are now. If I press the thruster, I want to move to the right. I want to only change my X position. So if I'm facing exactly to the right, my direction is exactly 90 degrees, and I press the up arrow key, I should change my speed X somehow. I should change my speed X by whatever amount I want to change my speed X by. If I'm facing exactly to the left, I want to change my speed X by a negative number. So I'm going more to the left. If I was facing exactly up, I would not want to change my speed X at all. I would want to change only my speed Y. Similarly, if I was going exactly down, I would want to change my speed Y and not my speed X, but I would want to change it by a negative number to make me going down. That's great. That's all very simple. But what about in the middle, right? What if I'm facing 675 degrees? So here, I'm mostly going to the right, but I'm going a little bit up. So I would want to change my speed X by more than my speed Y, but I would want to change both of them, right? My speed Y should go up by a little bit, and my speed X should go up by a little bit more. And it turns out there is some math that we can do to solve this problem, but it further turns out that the math we can do to solve this problem has been well studied, and in this mathematical discipline called trigonometry. And so what we need to do is just use these facts about circles that we know, and they're embedded in these trigonometric functions called sine and cosine. So I'm not going to go too deep into how this works, but basically we have these functions, these bits of math that can help us go from a direction, an angle, like this 90 degrees, this angle direction here. You can see if I click this, you can see what direction any given number is. We can go from an angle, like this 58 degree angle, and it will convert to however far, it will convert to an X and a Y change, right? Because if we go a certain amount in any direction, we're going to go some amount in the X and some amount in the Y. And we have the sine and cosine functions, which will help us do that. So I'm going to do something that I think is probably going to work, but I might accidentally make it so that the X and Y are switched because it's hard to keep track. So we are going to, if key up arrow is pressed, we don't want to set a variable, sorry, we want to change a variable. We want to change our speed X by I think we want to change our speed X by the sine of the direction that we are pointed. So that I'm going to go into motion and choose direction. And I think we want to change our speed Y by the cosine of the direction that we are facing. So how is that? I'm going to make sure I'm facing exactly 90 degrees. I'm going to make sure I'm exactly in the middle of the screen. And I'm going to press the up arrow key once. And I start drifting to the right. And that is fantastic. I'm going to turn around and press the up arrow. And now I am drifting in the other direction. So there are some things that are good about this. Mostly that it is the program is basically doing what we want. We have this physics here where we are drifting freely through space. But it's also pretty easy to get going super fast and be off the screen and not really be able to understand what's happening. So it's a little bit tricky. But this is working pretty good. I am currently having a great time playing the Starship round. You can't tell because I am a relatively staid and stolid individual, but this is truly delightful flying this Starship. So I do recommend looking at it and playing around with it later. But there are a couple of things that we might want to do here. one thing we might want to do is might want to clamp our speed to some maximum amount, because this, maybe we're going really, really fast, and this number here gets to be like 200, some huge number, and then suddenly I'm trying to go in the other direction and nothing's happening, and I'm just like stuck on the edge here, and it's all going to be very, very, it's just a little bit difficult to control here. All right, so I'm going to take one brief moment to think for a moment. There are two distinct phone calls happening in the room next to me, plus a crying baby, plus a barking dog. You may get some of that audio. I apologize. You are definitely getting the effect of that audio on my own personal thinking abilities, which is to say that it's a little bit distracting, but that's okay. We persevere. Life goes on. We have done these things. We have press up to apply thrust, press left to right to turn, and we have a basic physics. That's totally awesome, but I think it would be nice to have a little bit of a speed limit because it's a little tricky. So why don't we make a bit of a speed limit here? We're just going to say, we're going to do this really easily. We're going to do it with two if statements. We're just going to say, if the absolute value of speed x, if the absolute value of speed x is greater than some number, and I'm just going to call it, 5, then let's we're going to do something. Similarly, if the absolute value of speed y is greater than 5, we're going to do something else. But first, let's think about this. If the absolute value of speed x is greater than 5, we could then go ahead and we could set our speed x to 5. So I'm going to say set speed x to 5, and this is not going to work. It's going to kind of work. Oh, one other thing I'm going to do before I do anything else. I'm pressing the green flag. I really, really would like it if my starship would automatically start in the center here. Thing 1. And thing 2, I would like it if my speed x and speed y automatically started at 0, right? Because at the moment, when I press the green flag, I'm kind of at the mercy of whatever I was doing the last time I played the game. So I'm just going to get stuck in weird corners, and it's going to be confusing. So when the green flag is clicked, we're going to set our speed x, we're going to set our speed y, and we're also going to go ahead and set our position, by which I mean we're going to go to 0, 0. So now if I press the flag, I start in the middle, and I'm not moving. Let's also set our direction, so that we're always pointed in the same direction. Great. There's a funny little jaggy there. It'd be nice to eventually fix that. I'm not going to worry about it now. So now I press the flag, and that's great. And something works here. I can only go 5 in the right direction. So that's pretty great, but I'm going to do something. Now if I go to the left, I can accelerate up until the point where I get to a speed of -5, and then suddenly, if my speed x is -5, the absolute value of it is +5. If my speed x is -5.01, the absolute value is +5.01. So if I'm going too fast to the left, that's fantastic. I clamp my speed, but I go ahead and I set my speed x to be +5. And so that means I bounce back and forth in this kind of delightful way. So if I'm going to the left, I need to make sure that I set my speed to -5. What's the easiest way to do this? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to go ahead and say if speed x is less than 0. I'm going to need an if else, actually. I'm going to say if speed x is less than 0, set speed x to -5. Otherwise, I'm going to set it to 5, right? So now I'm saying if my, yeah, whatever. So now my speed should get clamped if I go to the right too fast. Yep, and my speed x gets clamped, and my speed y gets clamped, and that's great. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to copy this whole if statement, but I'm going to do the same thing for speed y. I'm going to switch out all these speed x's for speed y's here, and so now I'm going to hit the flag, and now my Starship has a maximum speed in both directions. So this is working. This is there's something that's not right about this, and I'm going to ignore it for now. But it's a little bit funny that if I go diagonally, I can go faster. But that's okay. Whatever. Things are fine. Things are fine. We're going to call this good. I'm going to hit stop. So now I have a maximum speed. 5 might be too small. All of these values could be, too big or too small based on anything, based on how the game we design ends up working. But we're doing pretty good. This is all we're going to basically cover today. It's 12:47. We got about 10 minutes left. But so I'm not going to jump into making a scrolling galaxy of stars to fly around. That is not going to happen this time. But what is going to happen is we're going to do a tiny bit more cleanup on this project. So we have, there's one thing I want to do here. If we go through our project, we can see a couple of places where we are using the same number over and over again, right? We picked this 5 here, and we said, if we go faster than 5, we set it back down to 5. If we go faster than -5, we set it back down to -5. If you ever have a number like this that means a particular thing, right? This 5 is a specific number. This 5 is our maximum speed. If you ever have a number that has a kind of meaning in your program, but you find yourself using it over and over again, you probably want to label it in some way. So in this case, this 5 doesn't just mean the number 5, it means our maximum speed. And in order to make our program a little bit easier to understand, I can go ahead into variables. I can make a variable. Again, I'm going to make it for this sprite only. I'm almost always going to pick for this sprite only. I'm going to call it max speed. So, and what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to say set max speed to 5. And I'm going to replace all of these 5s with variables. I'm going to take, so I'm going to say set speed x to -1 times max speed. So same thing here. Speed y, absolute value speed y, we're going to set that to max speed. And we're going to say -1 times max speed, and we're going to say max speed, right? So this should be exactly the same. Nothing has changed about our program. Everything is identical, has all the same functions, all the same features. But now, instead of having a 5 a bunch of times in a row, we have this max speed variable. This is nice for a lot of different reasons. One, it just makes it more understandable what's happening here. It makes it very clear that what we're doing with this if statement is clamping our speed to a maximum, to be under a maximum. But it also makes it really easy. So if for some reason I want to change my max speed and I actually want it to be 7, I can just change it there once. And now my max speed is 7. And you can see those numbers can go up to 7 now. Rather than having to change it in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different places, and then accidentally missing one of them and having something go horribly awry. So that's great. What if I want to change the actual speed? Not the speed, the actual like acceleration rate, the amount of force that this thruster applies. Where in my code am I choosing to, am I making that decision of how much the thruster should change my speed? Well, I'm making it here, but I'm kind of not making it, right? I'm changing speed x by the sign of direction. I want to be able to, I want to have some control over how much I'm changing the speed x. I always have to be changing the speed x and speed y, by the sine and the cosine to make sure that it's going in the right direction. But what if I want to double my speed? What if I want to double my acceleration? Well, I could go in here and I could take these, and instead of doing just sine and cosine, I could say sine and I could say sine and cosine times 2, right? So this will double my acceleration. So now I can accelerate much faster. I could accelerate much slower by making it sine and cosine times 0.1. And now you can see it's very slow to get this ship going, but once it does, it can go pretty fast. So I have this number here, and again, what am I doing? Well, I have the same number in two different places. I have the same number in two different places, so let's turn that into a variable. What are we going to call it? Let's call it thruster force. Thruster force. And it's the amount of force that is applied when we apply the thruster. So I'm going to set that as well. And why don't we set thruster force to 0.5? Pretty arbitrary. But I picked a number, and now I did it, and it works. That's great. Is that it? Is that everything we need to do? Now we have the speed x, we have the speed y, we have the thruster force. So there's two more numbers here. Two more special numbers. We have the turn left and turn right by 15 degrees. So let's go ahead and make that another variable, and let's call it turning speed. Scroll all the way to the top of this. We're going to set turning speed to 15. And then down here where it says turn left, turn counterclockwise, 15 degrees, we're going to say turning speed degrees. Same thing here. Press flag. Again, everything is fine. Everything's doing all the same stuff. So I'm going to happily hit stop and do just a tiny bit more cleanup. Let's see. What do we want to do in these last couple of minutes? Well, first of all, I don't need all of these numbers to be visible right now. So I'm going to click on these checkboxes to hide them. To hide these things are called reporters. They tell us what the value of variables are. We don't need to have them right now, so I'm going to hide them. What else? Well, first of all, we are supposed to be in the blackness of space. So, I mean, at the very least, before we do anything else, let's go ahead and be in the blackness of space. Oh, player ship, where are you? Oh, player ship, this is transparent. This probably needs to be some kind of lighter gray. How do we do that? Okay, there we go. And then fill it in. Yep. Maybe. There we go. And now, I forgot to change it for the thruster. So the body of the starship disappears when you apply the thrust. That's not good. That's bad. Delete. Do there. And here we go. Now, that is much better. So now we are in the blackness of space and drifting around freely. Wonderful. One more piece of organization to do. One more tiny piece of organization to do just to keep track of our program a little bit more is what I want to do is take some of this code. Oop, I'm going to hit undo. Okay, I'm going to take some of this code and reorganize it slightly. So the first thing is there's all of this stuff, all of these settings. I'm going to just make a block called setup. I clicked on I'll do that again in a minute, but define setup. I went to my blocks, I clicked make a block. I'm going to make a block called setup, and I'm going to take all of these things and just stick them there. And then I'm going to say do setup. I'm also going to do the same basic thing here. I'm going to make another block. I'm going to call it physics. And we're going to do a physics here. And what is physics in this case? Physics is going to be this thing here where we change our speed by our position. And then I'm also going to take this stuff, this whole thing that is all of the setting of our max speed, our speed limit. I'm going to put that in our physics as well. I'm going to say physics. And then I'm going to make one more block, and it's going to be called handle input. Handle input. Handle input is going to go here. And handle input is going to be all of our keyboard input things. I think I did not necessarily do that as clearly as I would like, but I'm going to go ahead and just test this game for a moment, and it's working perfectly. Fantastic. So now I'm going to reiterate what I just did, because I didn't do any new programming. I just did a little tiny bit of organization. So I said when green flag clicked, and then I put this setup block here. All I did was take all of this code that I had at the beginning of my when green flag clicked, and I put it in this setup block just to label it, just to make it easier to understand. Then I did the same thing for handle input, right? Forever handle input. I took all of the code that had to do with my key presses, and I put them in this handle input block. So I'm taking input, by handle input, I mean input from the player. So all the key presses that the player does, all the keyboard input, and then I did physics. So what is physics? Change X, change Y by our speed. Our physics in our game so far is to change our position by our speed, and then check if we are going too fast in one of the two dimensions, and if we are going too fast, to slow it down. That's pretty much it. So we'll call that good. We are now we're flying around. We've got keyboard input. We've got momentum. We're drifting around. We can fly this little starship. That's it for today. Tomorrow, we are going to go and think about how to make a scrolling galaxy of stars to fly around. So instead of moving this starship around this screen, we are going to keep the starship near the middle of the screen and have the whole galaxy move around us, so we can have a play area that is bigger than this single screen here. That's what we're going to do tomorrow. For now, we are going to we're going to give this a new name. We're going to call it episode 1. Maybe we'll need an episode there. We'll say 1, flying the starship. I'm going to click save now. I'm going to hop over to my project page. I'm going to make sure to share it. And then I'll say, press up arrow. We'll say press use arrow keys to fly starship. And then what are we going to say? We're going to say this project is part of an ongoing video stream series where we are making a Scratch game. A game from scratch. To see past videos or the upcoming schedule, visit www.twitch.tv/builtfromscratch. Great. I think that's pretty much everything. So I'm gonna share. I thought I had shared. Oh, right. It is shared. Is it shared? It's shared. Yeah. Okay. So that's it. I'm gonna hop over to my stuff and just see it flying the Starship. That's totally awesome. So that was super fun. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all tomorrow. Bye.